Okay. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you here tonight, and welcome to this Robert Mundell Global Risk Memorial Lecture. The lecture has been created some years ago to commemorate one of the founding teachers of SAIS Europe, Robert Mundell, well known not only to economists, but also to all students of European integration for his pioneering work on the notion of optimum currency areas. And Mundell was one of the very first professors when the Bologna Center was created back in the late 1950s, early 1960s. And it's important for us to commemorate somebody who's been a leading figure in our institution, and of course, well beyond the walls of our little institution. This lecture is organized also as part of our Global Risk Memorial Series, thanks to the generous funding made available by the chair of our advisory council, James Anderson. And I want to point this out too, because that's an element that basically is important for an institution such as ours. But it's above all a great opportunity to think about the relevance of Mundell's work to understand some of the issues Europe is still faced with in the present times. And I wish to say that I think that very few people would be better placed than our host today, Giancarlo Corsetti, to address those issues. Giancarlo is a well-known thinker in the world of macroeconomic policy with important work that has led him to teach in a large number of places. He was not long ago at the University of Cambridge. He now is at the European University Institute, where we were colleagues for a number of years. And he has decided to place his contribution to our reflection tonight exactly in the footsteps of Robert Mundell. So I think there's a perfect fit between what we as an institution wanted to do and what he as a thinker has in mind of putting on the table. And we very much look forward to the discussion that we will have tonight. The format is well known. I will give him the floor for 30 to 40 minutes to present his views, and then there will be hopefully ample time for discussion. But first, thank you very much, Giancarlo, for joining us tonight, and it's a pleasure to give you the floor.
So thank you very much for inviting me. It is a great pleasure and honor to be here. When I saw the invitation, Global Risk and Mundell, given the fact that I'm working on global risk full time for a long time now, I say, well, let's talk about Mundell. Much easier, much nicer, and also something that was in my mind for a long time. So I took the opportunity to look at the dedication of the lecture, moving a little bit away from the risk perspective. There will be a risk perspective. I prepared some slides. I'll go fast in the slides. The slides are long because actually I would like to write it up. what I'm saying, and this was a great opportunity for organize a little bit my thinking, but hopefully I'll use them for the question and answer. Okay, so yeah, just like, isn't it view? Page display, I guess. Page display.
I apologize.
Single. No, it's fine.
Okay.
Oh, you are here. I thought. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Here it is.
Fantastic. Okay, so we were talking that I have a very short frequentation with Bob Mundell many years ago, but he has been present in my discussion with Dorbush, the discussion with Opsfeld, and I was part of the revolution. There was called Beyond Mundell-Fleming, not the new generation of models coming after Mundell-Fleming. In a way, I'm also part of the generation that sort of is going back to at least the spirit and the methodology of the Mundell-Fleming. So what I'm going to talk about today, I start with my favorite quotation from Mario Draghi, which basically is telling us that the European Monetary Union is not a technical construction, it's a political process. And because it's a political process, it took time to develop, it's developing right now. He uses still this idea that the union is incomplete. At this point, I'm leaning towards it's indeterminate. We don't know where. So we don't have exactly idea what is a complete monetary union. But still has gone through several hurdles and is today much more stable than before. So I'm quoting the euro is stable, here to stay in a dinner speech, always by Mario Draghi. I didn't ask him whether he allowed me, so, but he says so. So it was a public speech. So why am I doing this? Because today I would like to do a small experiment to take Bob Mundell's contribution before the euro was created. That was big, like the Oka theory and all other contribution. And then sort of read it again in light of what happened in the last 25 years. And oops, let me see if it works. On, off. How come it doesn't work? Oh, we can use the screen. Oops. Yeah. Okay, like this. So just let me remind you, I just listed a few, I don't think it's all, the list is complete, what Bob Mundell's contributed to economics. The Mundell-Fleming model, and even more important, this idea of a trilemma of incompatibility between fixed exchange rate, free capital mobility, and autonomous monetary policy. People may not remember that there is this Mundell-Tobin effect. When the inflation is high, people move out of cash into investment. Big test the last 10 years, especially during COVID. After COVID inflation crisis, people did not move into investment because inflation was at a time of high uncertainty. So big test of this Mundell-Tobin effect that could be revisited. Supply side economics. And this is where maybe, 2 years from now, if you invite me again, we'll talk again about the need to rethink the incentive of the micro incentive or whatever we do. We discover, as if we didn't know before, that there are no supply or demand shocks. All shocks have demand and supply effect. There are policies have supply and demand effect. If I give you income, I support your spending, but I also tell you that many of you may want to drop out the labor force. So part of the problem with supply came from generous income support, rightly so given at the time of COVID. The policy mix big time back, especially after the global financial crisis and the Great Recession, the idea that you need to think about the instruments you have as the way they can substitute or complement each other in stabilizing the economy. All this could be the subject of different talk. Today, I just want to talk about the optimal currency area. By the way, optimal currency area, I'm going to talk to one side of it because there is another side, which is money's power. The optimal currency area, especially in the latest writing, was about the ability of a central bank to face the big guys from the US, like a Citibank, right? So this money's power is coming now in a new dress within the euro and in the relation with geopolitical. So all these are things that Bob Mundell touched upon or wrote a lot about. And all of them have not only a content, but also a methodological lesson that we can learn. So to make a long story short, what I want to do today is to think about the contributions, the relevance of this contribution today. And I'm going to do OCA-centered, just focusing on optimal currency area. And I'm here like misquoting Mario Draghi. For all its resilience, OCA theory is also incomplete, not only EMU. OCA and EMU, there is an intellectual and institutional side of our monetary unification process that tell us that we are in the middle of a river and we haven't crossed the river yet. So I'll try to propose you an exercise, a reconsideration of the OCA theory, which I'll try to bridge institution and intellects, institutional academics, using Mundell's own model. So I'm just forgetting what I did in the last 20 years. I just go back to the Mundell model, but also using the two large-scale experiments that somehow destiny gave us, which is the two big shocks that comparatively, from which we can learn things comparing the US and the euro area. So the two big shock of the great financial crisis, the global financial crisis, the Great Recession, and the COVID. So this is the game. So let me just skip what we can go back to this. So let me sketch a very simple representation of the idea of OCA theory. There could be many reasons why countries want to unify, join, adopt a common currency. In Europe, very simple. One money, one market. We wanted a single market. So one money was seen as a prerequisite for a single market. And second, also, the idea that one money could strengthen as a catalyst. One money is a catalyst for a political process of unification to keep peace in the continent. So the OCA theory comes asking the simple question, can we really do it? What do we miss? What are the foundations for having a stable one money area? And the idea goes like this. This is a very simple representation where you have a demand function. This is like the combination of output and interest rate by which investment is equal saving. You remember the IS curve. And what Bob Mundell started to think about, suppose that you join a monetary union and you have an asymmetric shock to demand. Something move the amount of goods that people would like to consume, buy in your country. Okay, so for a given monetary policy, for a given monetary stance, there is this shift in demand. So what Bob Mundell was thinking about is to say, okay, let's think about the instruments that a country has and the margin of adjustment that the country has if they retain their own money. If a country retains its own money, there is less demand for your good. You can do two things that are correlated. Drop interest rate, which means that every part of demand in your country that is sensitive to interest rate will be boosted by a drop in interest rate. Second, the drop in interest rate would have an effect on the currency, and the currency devaluation would activate a margin of adjustment, would increase global demand for the country output. So you drop interest rate, you buy more because you can borrow cheaper. The exchange rate depreciate, there is more internal demand and external demand for your country. Clearly, things are not that clean. It takes time. Sometimes doesn't go the way you go, the way you want, but this is the way in which monetary autonomy help you, giving you instrument and margin of adjustment. Now, without monetary autonomy, you basically give up an instrument and a margin of adjustment. So what matters is whether there is anything in the economy that sort of, I use the term mitigate the effect of the shock. What can mitigate the effect of the shock? There could be fiscal policy, which counteract, cross-border transfers, that could be both through institutional arrangement or via markets, wage price flexibility. Okay, there is less demand for Italian pasta, there could be a fiscal expansion in Italy, there could be transfer, there could be a price and wage that sort of create a real devaluation without the nominal exchange rate moving. Now, sometimes we also think about factor mobility. There is less demand for Italian pasta. At business cycle frequency, people may move, capital may go abroad. There is a slight difference. Here, with this kind of buffers, the full employment in the country, the full employment output stay fixed. If you send your factors of mobility abroad, your output goes down. Okay, this has become huge in the world. We have awareness. If you look at what's going on in Canada or in the US, even Powell not long ago sort of said that the miracle of the US in 2023 has a lot to do with immigration. Okay, so the size of the pie, if you look at the size of the pie, this is just to say that demography is coming back big time, and part of demography, apart from aging, is migration. So, by the way, moving people is not cheap, especially for the people who move or some people who remain linked. So it's a costly adjustment, right? And especially costly for the country that suffered the outflow. But this is like a whole story. So there is a list of things that people teach us. So if we unify our currency, it may be good to be exposed to the same shock, not to have asymmetric shocks, maybe to have the same kind of composition of industrial production, so an industrial shock become common to everybody. There could be compensation mechanism, fiscal or market. There could be labor capital mobility that move around and make the shock less, the unemployment aspect of the shock is buffered by labor mobility, or wage and price are flexible. All this is history. So the question is it enough? What is incomplete about this? What is it that could be done better or could be informed in light of what happened in the last 20 years? So let's go back to the blackboard and ask the two questions that Mundell asked. What are the instruments that we miss? Or better, generalize this question. What do we miss by adopting a common currency? And second question, what asymmetries matter? Which are the asymmetries that matter? Okay, so let's answer this question. So this I did with my undergrads. So we did a list and say, okay, there is instruments, there is margin of adjustment, but there is also constraint on policy instruments. So if you go through, so when you go, you see, this is like a table, I don't know whether you can read it. It's a table with two columns. One is when you have national monetary policy, the other one is when you join the euro area. Instruments, when you are national monetary policy, you can use conventional and unconventional monetary policy. Think of Sweden during the last 15 years. Interest rate, QE. There is also something different, which is you can have a fixed exchange rate with the option to switch to flexible, right? So there is, when you have a national monetary policy, you can even choose to go in and out a fixed exchange rate. When you are in a monetary union, it becomes much more costly to go in and out. Although some people like Schauble would considering the opportunity for Greece to take a sabbatical for the euro, I think at the end of the day, that didn't happen. When you go in the euro area, you have this similar thing, like not for national, but for the euro area as a whole, you have conventional and conventional monetary policy. Here is where I did 10 years of work, something that went basically forgotten in translation, right? Lost in translation. When you have your own monetary policy, you do monetary backstop on markets. You make sure that you look at markets in their eye and say, don't play with me, guy. Don't play with me. Meaning that we do not accept belief-driven, destabilizing, non-fundamental game on our bond market. This is more and more difficult to do because our debt is large, but our debt is large in part because we didn't do that enough, especially in the euro area. It took some time to have the monetary backstop in the euro area. It took quite a bit of discussion, but since September 2012, we had the OMTs, outright monetary transactions, subject to participate in a program. And more recently, we have the TPI, the Transmission Protection Instrument. We also have lending on last resort with fiscal responsibility. When you go to the euro area, the same thing, you have lending on last resort on the banking system, again, with national budget responsibilities, and we're still fighting on the banking union. This is the instrument part of going from one to the other. Let's think about margin of adjustment. Bilateral exchange rate we saw before. When you go to the euro area, you have external exchange rate, great for Germany, not so great for us, Italians. But you also have something else. You can choose your long-run inflation rate. If you are in the euro area, you cannot choose your own long-run inflation rate because there is an arbitrage. There is like a limited deviation from the common price level in the system. Is this a problem? It was discussed a lot by Milton, Friedman, and others. Today, I think it's under-discussed, especially during the zero lower bound period in which we had this idea that there was a period of deflation. There's still the idea that in a way with your own monetary policy, you can actually try to get away from a deflationary state by engineering more inflation. Constraint on instrument. When we are with our own currency, we have a finite amount of reserves and some ability to borrow. When in the euro area, the reserves are gone, right? This is the target to all the discussion. So we lose a constraint, but we still retain the effective zero lower bound on constraint on monetary policy. And then, of course, there is a change in the international lending from IMF bilateral, when you are on your own, to IMF bilateral plus the European Stability Mechanism. Okay, so this kind of exercise, I think, is pretty much in the spirit of the optimal currency area because you try to understand under what conditions going from column 1 to column 2 does it really kill you. Second, under what conditions, and once you understand those conditions, also what you need to do to make those conditions effective, a reality. So let me go into the, so keep in mind this list, we'll come back to this. Instruments, margins of adjustment, and constraint on instruments. What asymmetries matter, okay? So instead of moving the IS, I want to move the borrowing cost relative to the interest rate set by the ECB. So there is a spread that price differently the debt of different countries, and this spread goes into private and public sector borrowing. So you have basically an asymmetry in transmission that makes life very different whether you live in a high spread or a low spread, high borrowing cost, low borrowing cost country, okay? If you think that this is too simple, I'm happy because simplicity is now here what we need to go ahead. Okay, so relative to the original formulation, the way we teach OCA theory, we need to force ourselves to make the list more complete, and second, to enlarge the asymmetries that matter not only to exogenous shock, but to the transmission of shocks, or the transmission of instability in the form of different. So let me go to the data and put this list and different formulation of a theory to action by looking at what happened in the European Union and the US during the last 24, 25 years. What you see here is the unemployment rate in the US with the dispersion between the 25th and the 75th unemployment rate, like interquantile of US states, okay? So you see that there is states bear more or less unemployment rate. When the crisis hit, which is the vertical line, you see there's a little bit of an increase in the dispersion. But then soon it goes down, okay? During the COVID, because of the decision not to save the firms, but to give unemployment money, there's this huge peak in unemployment that, however, precipitously come down as the COVID crisis resolved. Enters the EA, okay? So you see two things here. Unemployment is higher, the dispersion is higher in general, but there is more to see here, right? What you see basically is that if you look at 2009, when the great recession started to roll in, the level of unemployment and the dispersion of employment is basically the same, okay? Soon after, the US, like get this increase in the level of employment, more dispersion, and some miracle happens there. It starts to go down, and the dispersion goes down. Okay, very simple. Again, it goes up, peak during COVID, comes down very quick. Dispersion goes down together with the level. Not in Europe in 2010, 2011. After being basically comparable across member states, we go up and we become way more dispersed. And it lasts a few years. So there is, there is a pattern there, right? So the more you're dispersed, the longer it takes you to go down to reasonable level. So let me just focus your attention on two features that this graph is trying to tell you. If you compare US and EA in 2010, 2015, you see that EA is scoring much worse. Okay, there is more dispersion, more persistence of the crime, of unemployment. But if you compare EA in 2019, 2013, and today, it's different, right? Actually, if anything, today reaction of the euro area to the COVID crisis is somewhat similar to the US reaction to the great financial crisis. Okay, to me that screams something that very Mundellian there. Okay, there has been a change there that I would like to plug into the scheme that I showed you before. So let me go back and ask the question. So why is the US able to, reduce the dispersion of unemployment and go down so quickly? Maybe it fits Bob's criteria. Labor mobility. First of all, concentration, like the regional diversification of output. Truly, they're not diversified. No, there is an industry that is pretty much located in different areas. So in principle, industrial shock become regional shock. There is labor mobility in general. It has gone down the trend. But the point is that it's very difficult to find labor mobility in response to the shock. Actually, many studies look at the response of labor mobility to the Great Recession, finding nothing significant there. What is even worse, very little price adjustment. So we may think that the US is more more flexible. You would have internal devaluation. I did a long study. Where is the internal devaluation? So in this picture, you see the price level of goods, of service ex shelters, non-tradable if you want, and house prices. The blue ones are the metropolitan statistical area of Pittsburgh, Denver, Dallas, Cincinnati. The red one is Phoenix, Miami, Tampa, Los Angeles. Now, if you look to the rightmost picture, when you see the red line, the price of housing tanking, you should see the number of unemployment rising. You should see the number of bankruptcy rising by the tens of thousands. Okay? So this is a situation where there is a true difference in the local conditions that do not map at all to prices. So if you think that in the US, as an example for Europe, if in the US a recession in Tampa should create an internal devaluation, think twice. It doesn't happen there. Actually, if anything, there is more internal devaluation in the euro area than in the. So are the asymmetry, are those kind of asymmetries criteria that play? I'm not saying that they're irrelevant. I say that if you look at historical data, sometimes they play, sometimes they don't, and sometimes they play differently what you think. So you need to look into something else. And the usual way. So I'm going to start very banal, but I would like to call your attention to a couple of non-banal things. Where is the US scoring high as an optimal currency area? Everybody say risk sharing. No? There is a federal fiscal policy that transfers, that spend more, and there are financial markets much deeper, so people can diversify their portfolio. That we know. What is not clear to me, or it took to me some time to understand the consequence of the second point, there is a monetary backstop. The Fed and the Treasury collude, cooperate to make sure that the debt market in the US is not subject to, the vagaries of the financial, of the investors. What is interesting in the US, of course, that there is a coincidence between ruling out the belief-driven crisis and making Treasury non-defaultable in nominal terms. Non-defaultability means basically that there is a sense in which the Fed and the US are very careful to make sure that people do not anticipate gains on the face value of bonds. If he says 100,000, he will pay 100,000. There could be an inflation risk there, but not a default risk. So all the spreads, pricing differences goes into the municipal bonds, state, city, financial and non-financial corporate and households, but there is basically no correlation, regional correlation between these two. So you know this, but let me, again, call attention to this to ask the question, how would we translate that into an OCA criteria? And here is my attempt. In Europe, we could not have non-defaultability and monetary backstop as the same thing. The ECB needed to provide monetary backstop to Italy, the Netherlands, and Germany, making sure that could not make any of these non-defaultable. It's not in our constitution. So we need to accept a spread, different default risk, yet eliminate the let's say self-fulfilling crisis, self-fulfilling risk premium. So this is not obvious, right? It's not obvious how you do it. And this is, in a way, it is a criteria for an optimal currency area. Remember the list of instruments. The UK, the US, Sweden did monetary backstop. They implemented monetary backstop. When the crisis struck, the ECB was confused because there was no political arrangement. There was no thinking about this. How you eliminate, you backstop without ensuring non-defaultability. So a new OCA criterion, it would have been great to have Bob thinking about this. So if we, in the light of the last 20 years, on top of what we saw before, an optimal currency is an area in which there is the possibility of a political consensus on doing this. Now, what happened remember, so when I show you the picture with the spread, right? You can think of the spread as the combination of fundamental weaknesses and market valuation, which may not be anchored to fundamental. There could be multiple equilibria there, for example. So if we don't anchor that, we pay an enormous price, and it is the end of the euro. In 2012, there could have been the end of, actually, the end of the euro was the scare that created the political support. Remember, if you have an anchor market belief, means that minor shock can become large through these asymmetries. Per se, this market belief become a source of shock. They cause fragmentation in the economic financial space across borders. So forget the single market. And of course, they worsen inequality and erode political support. Now, to make clear, when we talk about market-driven belief, we are not talking about excess champagne. We're talking about people sitting around the table, me and Renaud tonight at dinner, thinking that this country is doomed. There's too much debt, so we can only offer a very low bond price. If everybody does like us, we coordinate on that equilibrium, the country will start to move in that direction. The state of the economy will change. Because, when we charge a high price, borrowing costs go up, there is less investment, people move away, right? So the economy, the state of the economy is moved in the direction that we anticipate in a self-fulfilling way. And 2 years from now, we would at dinner again say, you see how right we were, right? That was doomed without realizing that it's our expectation that sort of move the country that direction. So an optimal currency area without monetary backstop, actually modern monetary system without a monetary backstop are doomed. And we can have another discussion about original sin, emerging market, and other, and the use of reserves. It's exactly the same problem. So why? Let me go very quickly. I remember in 2009-10, when I started to work on this thing, there was a surprise that corporate and sovereigns in Europe will have the same destiny in terms of borrowing cost. We were shocked by the fact that there was this large economic divergence. And remember, part of this economic divergence was driven by market beliefs. And we were sort of thinking, how can we have a single market where Germany and France, the blue and the green line, pay 3%. The firms in Germany and France pay 3% on their loan, and Spain and Italy, for the same loan, same characteristic, would pay 6%. So we let the genie of the self-fulfilling crisis out of the bottle. We did something beautiful in 2012, but the state of the economy changed, and we are still paying the consequences. By the way, what is a single market, right? Where when you go across the street from Italy to Austria, the same firm producing the same thing faces two completely different borrowing costs, okay? So let me close with two steps. The first step is celebrating the fact that we stop a very dangerous trend towards an unstable EA. And how do we do that? Remember, in 2012, there was enough political consensus to allow the ECB to touch government bonds, right? To touch government bond, to buy government bond, with the production of the outright monetary transaction, and lately the transmission protection instrument. All these things raise a host of problems, right? Number one, How do you know that is self-fulfilling versus fundamental? Judgment call. Second, conditionality. How do we know that our willingness to intervene does not create misbehavior? And there is like the OMTs, there is the ESM program as a precondition. The TPI is a little bit more fuzzy. It's like a sort of a sustainability assessment. But what people sort of should remember is that there is a fundamental difference between us and, for example, the UK, where I was at the time. In the UK, they just bought guilt, no question asked. We could not do that, right? Because remember, the fundamental political structure of the ECB is that we cannot deal really on individual basis with country debt. We need to always intervene with the key, collectively, in a way that is spread across all the debt. So it was important to create an instrument that didn't require really purchase. And this is high economics. I wrote a paper, I gave a lecture at the EA. There was a rule by the Constitutional Court in Germany talking about economics. So the idea was to engineer something that works as a credible threat. Okay, remember what credibility means. I'm credible if I have the means, the big bazooka, and I have the will. Nothing can stop me. No institution, no political, no other. The markets must be convinced that the ECB, if challenged, will buy. The way we design these programs are basically credible threats to intervene in the market without necessarily ever a debt purchase exposed. This we created basically ex post. I sort of fantasize about this additional OCA criteria, and here we get one example of how to satisfy the OCA criteria. OCA criteria is there could be nothing must prevent the monetary policy to give monetary sovereignty to everybody in the area, and an important component of monetary sovereignty is a stable government debt market. Stable meaning not that there is no spread, but stable means that it's shielded against adverse self-fulfilling development. So I agree with Mario Draghi when he said at the time, the most successful monetary policy measure undertaken in recent times. It was a great thing. And maybe we forgot. Everything I say is pretty banal. Is when you put them together, it's become less banal. The US and the UK, they could do it, guaranteeing non-defaultability and monetary backstop. Here, we need to split the two. That was not banal. So I'm finishing with a question. So here we are today. We did that. So that a big component of the market belief instability is gone. How about the rest of the spread? Remember, we wanted to do the European Monetary Union for the single market. You can see that the spread creates a problem in the single market. Competitiveness. No, the high spread countries are at a disadvantage. And it's obvious the countries may try to tamper with the single market to help their firms. For example, industrial policy of various types, subsidies, guarantees. But there is also a macro stabilization issue because with the spreads, what happened, we are in a chronic deficiency of fiscal spending for obvious reason. If you're a high spread country, you cannot spend, you don't have space. If you're a low spread country, you don't want to do that. Again, obviously, because there is an advantage from the low spread, and there is also, you don't want to be confused. There is an issue of inequality and cohesion. So we can see the spreads are bad, and we can see the spreads are good in a way because they create the incentive to do something. They create an incentive to correct the economic policy. How do we get out of this? What is the OCA criteria? What is the situation, the way to think of how to resolve the tension between these two things? So we may envision a world with deeper market integration. So firms from Italy can borrow from the Netherlands, or you can have a mortgage in another country. Remember, all this discussion goes through the banking system. This is true. On the other hand, spreads tend to hamper market integration and create lots of incentive not to want your people to go out, especially on the banking system. So basically, I leave you I will open the discussion with this thing. So what is the future of Europe? What are, or if you want, in a Mundelian perspective, what are the OCA criteria that make spread livable? Diminishing this tension, right? And my personal opinion is that it would be very difficult to envision any step without some integration of fiscal capacity. Some. We don't know how much, we don't know how, but some will be. And the reason is pretty obvious. In a banking union, it's difficult to have a banking union without some integration. And it's difficult to think of a banking union forgetting the incentives that banks have. So for example, to tell local banks you cannot have local government bond goes nowhere, because local banks, in the case of a default of a country, will go belly up in any case, whether or not they have national bonds, right? But clearly it's completely rational for them to actually expose their portfolio to lot. No? When things are good, they get the spread. When things are bad, they're doomed in any case. So let me close with this. I don't know whether you are aware of this, but this is important. So the kind of fiscal the problem I'm raising cannot be solved with a little bit more of Eurobond. Here I'm plotting what happened to Euro area issuance, especially after COVID. There's been a huge amount of supranational, half of which I think is bought by the central bank in any case. Red is the supranational, is basically the EU bonds. It starts below, if you look at the interest rate, it starts below the ESM bonds, it starts below the Netherlands, right? Then something happened in 2022. And now it's basically above the EIB, above France. I would say close to I think I missed one thing. By the way, it is basically on the high side of the, not as much as Spain, but on the high side. So again, this is a AAA bond, by the way, because constitutionally the AAA. So there is this kind of warning sign that the problem of spreads cannot be solved by simply adding a common issuance. There is something deeper there for the OCA criteria. So let me stop here, just saying that I found very useful to engage in this exercise, sort of reverse engineer Bob Mundell OCA and run it again, run the movie again. And one part, I think it was very insightful for me to learn that there's been this lost in translation OCA criteria, the monetary backstop, successfully dealt with so far. The other half is still haunting my nights, which is I don't understand how we can actually think of a political process that solves this journey towards not a complete OCA, but an uncharted, an undefined final station for our endeavor.
Well, thank you very, very much, Giancarlo, for this very stimulating talk. I think it's we couldn't dream of a better way to pay tribute to the legacy of Robert Mundell and well, the resilience of his ideas that you have very well illustrated. I think it was also very nice of you to put so many ideas on the table, but whilst at the same time outlining how many questions there remained to be addressed. So I have no doubt that on this basis, there would be room for a long discussion. We only have a little less than 40 minutes, but I'm sure there will be no shortage of questions and remarks from students and colleagues. I will say that in line with our tradition, I would like to give precedence to students' questions in order to encourage them to raise any question that they may have. And well, I very much look forward to this discussion. So in asking your question, I will ask you please to introduce yourself so that our lecturer has the opportunity of knowing to whom he's speaking. Who wants to kick off? Yes, please. You were quick.
Buonasera. Thank you so much. My name is Francesco Paolucci. I'm in the Master of European Public Policy. And thank you for being here and giving us this fascinating talk. My question is simple, I think, but difficult to answer, I hope. Do you think in the long term, the EA will have what it takes to compete with the American economy and especially with China? Thank you.
Nothing like a broad question to kick off, Giancarlo.
You want me to do dialogue or?
As you wish.
Collect two.
Okay. A second question to give time to our lecturer to combine ideas. Yes.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I'm Michael Pickerton, a first-year MA/IR student, and I'm curious how you think of sort of the recent developments around EU joint borrowing after COVID and how the German court decision has sort of taken that aback, but then also looking forward, the willingness of other EU countries to engage in more integration, both fiscally and as shown by that borrowing. Thanks.
So very quickly, let me start with the second one. So one of the reason we feature so well, I wrote a paper called it the benign coincidence, but really we have two steps forward that recently. One, we consolidated the OMTs with the TPI. And the TPI was really a political, more than it's less technically refined than it is, right? It's a political, there is clearly a political willingness there. And the other one is the common budget. Now I show you that the common budget does not translate into a AAA nice behavior borrowing, but it really was a game changer. So in a way, the short answer to my question is that while there is a clear opposition to make the exercise anything less than temporary, right? I'm not sure that position will be, the test of the time will tell us whether the position is clearly, because of obvious reason, no? The geopolitical, so we'll see. My short answer is we'll see. I'm actually confident that, I mean, the euro has been extremely resilient, no? Like if you ask Greek people, they went through, or Italians are going through an enormous long decline that is not only the euro, but euro definitely has not contributed much. So there is this sense of resilience. On the first question, which is connected to this, why not? But the way I think about it is a trio of issues that we cannot but focus on: debt, technology gap, and demography. And the three of them are related. They're different in different countries. So we have a climate change, geopolitical, but debt technology gap and demography are now becoming increasingly the frame of our policies. Those are state of the economy that comes from policy in the past, but we know that there is no policy that can really change this thing very quickly. So the direction, I think, will be central. I do not see how we can do this without the single market, the three of them. Because the single, so this is in the sense, what I'm trying to raise, why I'm thinking about Mundell optimal. Let's live with spreads. We can find a way to live with spreads. But the real litmus test is whether they create enough space for the single market to succeed, to give us the scale and the good competitiveness necessary to face those questions. So as of today, my answer is there is no reason to be skeptical. If 5 years from now we are still in this situation, I may change my mind.
Thank you. Who's next? Questions, comments? Yes, please. Guido.
Hi, it's been a great talk, so thanks. I'm Guido Sandleris, professor here, former governor of the Central Bank of Argentina. So there was one aspect of your talk that kind of resonated a lot with me, which applies not only to optimal currency area, which is the monetary backstop to government. And in your presentation, during most of it, you put it as a key thing to keep spreads under control. And at the end, you make, well, some caveats to that, because if not, where is the limit? No one wonders, pick any country, the argument for a monetary backstop would apply as well. There could, in any country, it's not only in currency areas where you might have situations in which market dynamics, just based on expectations, become disengaged from fundamentals. And you say, well, judge. That's the key. When something is happening because of fundamentals and when it's just expectations dissociated from them. And one of the things that I learned doing it is that sometimes both things tend to happen simultaneously. There is some fundamental issue and market dynamics makes it work. And so my question to you, Giancarlo, is how can we try to get away a little bit from fundamentals and try to have a clearer framework with which to think about this kind of situation, market dynamics dissociated from fundamentals vis-a-vis fundamentals as driving a crisis or increasing the spreads?
Easy question.
Just that, again, it's a great lecture, and I tend to agree with almost all the points you made. I just have a question linking to the sovereign bank nexus. And if in one of these set of instruments to improve, to apply the OCA to the EU, we could not also think at microprudential regulation. And the idea is this idea that somehow what has been done since OMT is just to sort of asking domestic banks to hold more of domestic bonds, because this decreases the risk of default because it's politically more costly. But also it creates all this problem because now the sovereign bank nexus is much stronger. So the question is that shouldn't we sort of putting some these different risk criteria vis-a-vis capital to discourage domestic banks who hold domestic T-bills?
Sorry, repeat.
To discourage domestic banks to hold domestic T-bills, especially in risky countries.
Okay, so on the judgment monetary backstop, so I've been actually working a lot. Argentina is the never-ending source of inspiration. But the point is that it is what this no. But the point is, I would like to finish. I'm working. So I think that monetary backstop is actually the ability to give monetary backstop is what give you the graduation from the original seed. So when you are in a situation where the full monetary sovereignty is the monetary backstop. So before going to, and this is where the judgment, the passage is important, right? You can have countries that have a large domestic currency debt market, still at the margin, you know, like the international financial market sort of push for foreign currency debt. There is a clear correlation between expected inflation and the portfolio. So you can think of a construction in which we say, okay, we need to have a reasonably stable fiscal position, a reasonably committed central bank to inflation targeting, let's say. We have independent fiscal institution, strong financial institution. These two buildings are still not working very well if without the inner plumbing, without the basement where the monetary backstop operates. And this is at the judgment in the monetary backstop is what is actually the moment. No, so far we have periods in which we move towards that, very little going back, but in the past we have big time going back, and we may have going back, example of going back. So I don't have a solution to that. I'm working on it, try to get see both the empirics and the modeling of what creates basically the full graduation by, I mean, very concrete. You have a central bank that is independent, but somehow make clear to the market that they would like to, in case challenge, they would intervene in that market. How to convince markets that this is not monetary financing, this is not fiscal dominance. This is the passage, right? That's the question. And in the case of Europe, we made this amazing construction. But the euro was doomed. I have no doubt that the euro would have broken out, like in 2012 without this. How you do this passage, I think is students or whatever, when in your political career, you know, or in academic career, this is the most fascinating at this point, one of the most fascinating things. I'm getting there, like, you know, but if you think, remember the big difference is the following: if you have currency, foreign currency debt, you can do some with reserve, but reserves are expensive. If you can just print if you just threaten market to print, to run the printing press, the mystery of the printing press. I remember what is bad about a lender of last resort. If I want to be a lender of last resort and sitting in Argentina with dollars, the size that I have to maintain, you know, answer the following very difficult question. What kind of off-equilibrium crisis I could have if I don't have enough reserves? So you size the amount of reserves, not to the need of next month import. You size the amount of reserves of what would be a bad scenario if you didn't have them. Okay, so this kind of exercise may explain why on average countries hold 12–15% of GDP on reserves, costly 1 or 2% a year in terms of interest rate missing. They could have done, you know, highway, hospital. This is the point of view of Danny Roderick. And the reason is that they need to sit on an enormous amount of reserve, more than what they actually use, because what they have in mind is not the next shock next month. They demand is something that can happen if they don't have that, which is, you know, an interesting exercise in policy making, value at risk, and taking risk in what you do. So getting rid of that, it would be an amazing improvement for the world, right? Amazing improvement for millions of people in terms of resources and possibility of living much better. On the summary, so I don't know. Many students want to work on banking union. I only say, why don't we start with what we have, right? We have heterogeneous banks. For large banks, I think makes a lot of sense to already start giving guidelines of diversifying their portfolios. Makes sense. For small banks, forcing them to dump local debt is strong, right? You need to change something, no? It's not a macro pro issue. You need to sort of change the incentive. You need to get somehow the Hoka criteria, I say, somehow a way to paradoxically, you make the local bank more risky like that. So you tell them you need to increase the cost of capital and you need to give up a source of income, not because you give up this kind of gambling on the spread. So how to go from here to there, I don't know. It is, I'm not sure that the solution is in the banking union. The solution could be in something above it, no? Or related to the fiscal integration. But this is, frankly speaking, I don't think anybody has a clear call for that. I'm sure somebody will have proposed.
Thank you, Alessandro.
Yes, I'm Alessandro Meri. I'm a fellow here at SAIS Europe. I'm going to pick up from one of the questions that was asked by the student earlier on, and that was, since you started with a quote from Mario Draghi, we may close the circle and go back to Draghi again, because Draghi is going to present this European competitiveness report shortly. I'm not sure exactly when, if before or after the election, but I was wondering if you have the expectation, or should we wish that the report includes more common fiscal policy, at least for European public goods, which is something that you kind of hinted at before? Would this be an essential part of building the OCA around what you said, or not? Would you think that that's an essential component of what the next step should be? And then very briefly on the last figure you showed about the price of the European Union bonds going down, or the yield going up after 2022. You kind of hinted at an explanation, but I would like you to be more explicit on that, how you see that happened. And so that is not the European safe asset after all, or is it?
On the, so we work quite a bit actually at the UI with this thing called EMU Lab, the laboratory for proposal and thinking. So in our view, maybe this is the way to think forward, which is we have a energy, defense, European public climate transition problem, and we have a single market as an asset. So once we have these three things, in a way, the macro stabilization governance should be ancillary, right? We should make sure that this provides stability, create space. So in a way, I'm obsessed with this idea of how do we create policy space, which is different from fiscal space. It's more is bigger. Fiscal space is simply the fact that you can, it's very simple. How much you can borrow without having too much the interest rate moving against you. The policy space, in my view, is something that relates also to electoral support, the consensus, and the space of complementarity between macro fiscal and monetary policy. So we learned in the last 10 years that thinking of fiscal and monetary policy as two instruments has never been intellectually very, very good, but in practice is a disaster. We need to think about a multiplicity of instruments. And the theory of monetary, the monetary fiscal the policy mix, by the way, on which the fingerprint of Bob Mundell are there, is a theory that not only theorizes the substitutability, when you have more instrument, you can do less with the others, is a theory that actually, if you look into this, is more about the complementarity of it. How you create the right combination. The principle of effective market is one case, but we can talk more. So to make a long story short, it could be that the same way in which we suffered through the crisis without questioning the euro could be the premise to think how do we can deliver on these public goods that you quoted by ensuring a minimum of working for the macro governance with spreads and everything. So my answer is that I don't know what Mario Draghi will write there, but I'm quite sure. What? No, actually, I haven't talked to him in a year, 2 years now, but it's in 1 year since he left. But the point is that I'm expecting. So what I'm saying is that it would be nice to sort of revert the order of reasoning to see what we need to do. And it's not easy, by the way, because even the European public good will be subject to, it's not only an issue of how you finance it, but also an issue of who does it and where. And so you can see a lot of political bargaining and discussion there. So I don't know whether I answer your question, but this is I didn't have any theory about the interest rate here. Why there are many. Some people say it's liquidity. Some people say markets do not like things with an expiration date. This is a bond that is not going to be a permanent feature, no, because it's only one-off, program. I'm starting to think about, or the reason why I'm putting this on is because it shows the difference between us and other countries with full monetary sovereignty. You can do the backstop with non-defaultability. We cannot do that. We cannot even ensure non-defaultability to the in a way. No, we leave markets to price. I think you may be closer to the market than I am, but the haircut is almost 7%, right? So whenever they're using repo, these bonds are really treated far away from a AAA standard, which is a little bit of a paradox, no? So, and I'm at this point, I'm sitting here and say, it's fine. I mean, I don't care. It's fine. I'm happy to have a spread if the spread are positioned in net development, no? That use them right.
Not being an economist, can I ask a footnote question on this graph? That is to say, if we were to look at the US situation, wouldn't we find some degree of variation too in the different types of bonds that can be emitted by different public authorities in the US? So, or is it the case that they're all flat at the same level?
The treasuries are the treasury. Recently, there have been lots of strange malfunctioning. There's been the New York Fed has been dealing with a few episodes starting in 2019 and 2020 of, but the treasury, no, the treasury. I mean, different agency may have, and definitely municipal bonds.
You have the EIB,
yeah. Municipal bonds would not be guaranteed. But what I'm saying is that the bulk of it, the nominal safe assets in the US is. By the way, there is this. If you think about it, our discussion is often linked to the so-called fiscal theory of the price level, right? The fiscal theory of the price level is basically a statement such that if deficits are not covered by future primary surpluses, you need to have an adjustment in the price that reduces the real value of that. Chris Sims and I was colleague a long time ago with Chris, and we had a long discussion about this. And clearly, you can think that the adjustment goes through price level or through default, right? So I asked Chris, what do you think? We could have, and he say, look, I know that, but for the US, default would be. So in a way, that there was a welfare call there. The fact that for the US, at least the way we knew it, the way we knew the country before recent development, it was clearly not a discussion. No? The reliance on the full face value of US issue debt should not be discussed. And domestically, international, and the Fed was clearly committed to that. So the fiscal theory of the price level becomes much less obscure if you think about it as a theory that says that there is a commitment by the central bank to guarantee the face value of the bonds. Then obviously, if the government does something strange, you can think the markets become nervous, they start to dump the debt, the Fed intervene, there is a monetary expansion, the price eventually goes up, but that becomes less obscure in a way in the mechanics of the fiscal theory of the price level. In Europe, it's not even, it would be even difficult to I have colleagues and co-authors who have been trying to work a European version of it. But again, they run into the non-defaultability and the extent to which the judgment call translate into intervention in the bond market, apart from other issues that the theory may have.
Thank you. I'm looking at the audience to see if there is any. Yes, please. Wait.
I speak loud enough anyway. My name is John Kojan, and my first course on European economic integration was at SAIS in 1977. And since then, I've kind of lost track of it. But I've got a question, and that is, the European banking system is fragmented compared to the largest U.S. banks. If there were more consolidation in the European banking system, would that facilitate more monetary union, or is it kind of neither here nor there?
The short answer is yes. It will be. So the precondition for that is tricky, because after the crisis, the fragmentation was deeper exactly in the banking system, and with costs that we see, because banks in Europe not remotely compare with the performance of the U.S. counterparts. So I think this is a little bit what. But as of today, the discussion on the capital market union is esoteric. It's a scholar discussion. This is why everybody talks about it, because I can say anything. There's nothing going to happen. Banking union is equally stuck, a little bit less esoteric, but it's stuck on the fact that it's very difficult to do what you're saying if we don't solve the issue of the commonalities. Franco-Italian banks need to have an uncle that puts the money in case, and this uncle, the two cousins from this side or the other side of the Alps at this point still haven't engaged in how to do that. So the short answer, again, as I said before, it would be great. So there's this tension between the fragmentation and the single market that goes either way. More single market would reduce fragmentation, but more fragmentation in a way creates, so basically, it's sort of a catch-22, right? You would like to have a single market to reduce the fragmentation, but because of fragmentation, you cannot have really the single market. So how to unplug this thing? Maybe Draghi will have some idea of how to bypass the current state, which is complete stall, complete stall. There is very little progress on anything.
Thank you.
A bit crude, but I think that's what it is.
At the risk of complicating further the analysis, I would like to invite you to tackle the problem from a slightly different angle, because so far, and understandably, you have very much focused on the toolbox, the instruments, and indeed, I think that's a necessary starting point. But now that we know a little better about the instruments, maybe we should also ask ourselves some questions about the institutional setup, because it seems to me that, so far the reliance has very much been on, by default, so to say, at the European level on what the European Central Bank would do and should do. But the point is that as we well know, it's being created as an independent institution, which is probably the way it should be, but that has consequences on its certainly on its accountability to the public at large, because there is no question of electoral accountability. You in discussing the notion of policy space, you mentioned that there should be electoral support. If that's not, I mean, how do you envisage that being provided in your dreams, so to say?
No, that is when I say, when I talk about the policy space, is not technical. It becomes more of an issue of political this is where, you know, the limit of economics go. I'm trying very hard to have this interdisciplinary dialogue on this thing, because clearly I think part of the policy debate is very far, and the electoral debate is very far. Now, the far electoral debate is never clear whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Sometimes the fact that people do not discuss this could be depending on you, but it's clearly not in the long run a feasible set. Not in the long run a feasible set. So I have to confess that I don't have, I didn't think about this in the right way with it. So I don't want to say banal things, but it is today the challenge, right? So think about the discussion on a big fund. The ESM is not part, you know, as we know, is an intergovernmental thing. So in principle, we could articulate the institution, no, with a more. But again, the policy and the consensus for that is tricky. But it could be one way to think of relieving the ECB from part of the responsibility at this point tend to be very, very, very much large. So my small, let me say in a very honest way, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this question, Joran.
I don't either. I have no ready to use answer to that.
I'm quoting Tom Sargent. Tom Sargent sometimes look at you and goes, nod, and then he says, I don't know. But it means completely different. If you say so, then if I say so, right? If you say I don't know, you would think that this guy has no clue.
No, but
take me in the Tom Sargent way. I don't know.
I think we need to continue this discussion because, I mean, the fact is that Europe has been built the way it has been, partly to limit political discretion, not only at the level of the ECB, by the way, and to depoliticize many difficult decisions, which is fine up to a point. But
can I answer? So what I really do not know how to do is how to envision a policy debate addressing indirectly the following question. Is diversity heterogeneity in Europe a problem or an asset? Because, you know, if we can address this issue, it would be great. So far, the diversity heterogeneity has been a problem, right? The North, the South, the Germany and France. The problem that we have now, which may be less homegrown, but more coming from outside, no? The green energy. All this may create, may give people smarter than I am a clue of how to think that maybe diversity heterogeneity sometimes, and no, within the European system may actually be in our favor, rather than being the constraint of what we can do. This, I don't have the answer. I have the feeling that it is a potential way to think about it.
Well, I think in some respect, my question is I would say, at a different level, in the sense that it would ask the question, okay, who decides whether diversity is acceptable pitch at the right level or not? I mean,
Sure. No, but I'm very concrete. It's not abstract in the sense that if you have crisis among Rome, Italy is misbehaving, so they deserve to be punished, right?
Mm.
If with shocks like COVID or other stuff in which, they're more, they may affect different parts of the union in different ways. So all this idea that we economists label risk sharing, or you could think of self-interest solidarity also is another way to put it, like John Tirole does. So that there could be ways in which there is actually more of a covenants on how to address shocks with asymmetric effect. So the analogy would be, global warming with possible global warming and climate will create not only a trend, but also lots of variability, right?
Mhm.
So the value of trade in a situation like this is much higher, because whenever I have a famine, whenever I have a currency, I would have my neighbor who may be in much better position. So the same thing within Europe, whether for energy, for green, there are many aspects of what we need to do, that whether this diversity can be, even in demographic, can be an asset. But of course, this is a big revolution in the way of think, right? Politically, because we would be, the narrative for this would be very different from the current inward looking.
I can't think of many politicians who would dare say what Powell said about the migrations, for instance.
No, he didn't say. He just said that the 2023 was an exceptional year. Oh, by the way, productivity for the first time pick up, which is, we don't have any way to prove it, but there could be a correlation there between the flow of migration and. But think about the UK and other places. Migration flow in terms of the total pie, the GDP, makes a hell of a difference, no? In terms of sustaining production.
Well, it seems to me that this discussion does illustrate what I tried to say earlier, namely that we could go on and on and on for quite some time, because we haven't solved all the problems that have to be solved in order to, let's say, make sense of the European brand of currency area. But at least this discussion also shows what we want to show through this lecture series, namely the lasting relevance of Robert Mundell's work to our understanding of that situation. So, yes, I would accept your suggestion, Giancarlo. Let's meet in a couple of years again, and we discuss this. I'm sure that it would be as interesting in 3 years' time as it has been tonight. And I really want to thank you one more time for having accepted to, let's say, having accepted our invitation and having so nicely illustrated what we were trying to illustrate. Thanks again, and I wish you all.
Thank you. Thank you for the time.